In the summer of 1661, the richest man in France threw a party so beautiful it would be remembered for 300 years. Nicolas Fouquet, the king's finance minister, opened the gates of his new chateau to the greatest minds in Europe. Molière wrote a play and performed it himself. A 7-course feast arrived, dishes from the East that France had never tasted. Fountains and fireworks lit the gardens that would later inspire Versailles. And walking beside Fouquet, smiling all night, was the guest of honor, the young King Louis XIV. It was, everyone agreed, the most magnificent evening of their lives. The next morning, Fouquet was arrested. He would spend the rest of his life in a mountain prison. He had done everything right and lost everything by dawn. Why? Because he broke the first rule of power. Fouquet thought the party would flatter the king, but a young ruler, insecure on his new throne, did not see tribute. He saw a subject richer, more charming, more adored than himself. And in the eyes of the powerful, being outshone feels like a threat. This is Law 1 in Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. Never outshine the master. Always make those above you feel comfortably superior. Compare Fouquet to the astronomer Galileo, who, when he discovered the moons of Jupiter, did not claim the glory for himself. He named them after his patrons, the Medici, and let them bask in the light of the heavens. The Medici made him rich for life. One man displayed his brilliance. The other made his masters feel brilliant. Only one of them died free. Robert Greene spent years reading the lives of courtiers, generals, con artists, and kings. 3,000 years of scheming, from Machiavelli to the emperors of China. And he came to a cold conclusion. Power, he writes, is essentially amoral. It is a game. And whether you like it or not, whether you even notice it or not, you are already playing. Every office, every family, every friendship is a version of the old royal court, where everyone competes for influence and no one says so out loud. Greene distilled that endless game into 48 laws. We can't walk through all of them, but a handful will change how you read every room you ever walk into again. One of them, at the very end, contradicts all the others, and it may be the most important of all. Hold on to that. Start with the surface, because in the game of power, the surface is everything. Greene's rule. Everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. In 1836, a young showman named Phineas Barnum learned this the hard way. Traveling through a town in the American South, Barnum was suddenly surrounded by a mob who believed he was a murderer who had escaped the noose. They nearly hanged him on the spot, until it turned out the whole rumor had been planted by his own employer to draw a crowd to the show. Barnum wasn't angry. He was enlightened. He had just discovered the secret that would make him the most famous man in America. It didn't matter if they loved him or hated him. All that mattered was that they were looking. That is Law 6, court attention at all cost. To be talked about, Barnum realized, is better than to be ignored, because the crowd never distinguishes for long between fame and infamy. But attention is only half the game. Reputation is the other half, and Greene calls it the cornerstone of power. Consider a Chinese strategist named Zhuge Liang, the man they called the Sleeping Dragon. One day he found himself in a city with almost no soldiers, and an enemy army marching straight for the gates. He could not fight, he could not run. So he did something insane. He threw the gates wide open. He dressed in robes, sat on the wall in full view, and calmly played his lute. The enemy general arrived, stared at this serene, unguarded man, and turned his entire army around and fled. Why? Because Zhuge Liang's reputation for cunning was so total that the general couldn't believe his own eyes. An empty city had to be a trap. The man's name did the fighting for him. That is the terrifying leverage of reputation. Build it once, and it defends you when your walls are bare. But notice what Zhuge Liang did not do. He didn't explain. He didn't argue. He said almost nothing at all and let the silence do the work. Greene turns this into its own law. Always say less than necessary. The more you say, the more common you appear, and the more likely you are to say something foolish. Powerful people impress and intimidate by saying less. Watch anyone truly in command, and you'll notice they make you fill the silence. And in that silence, you reveal yourself. If appearance is everything, then you can build yourself into whatever the moment demands. Greene calls it recreating yourself, refusing the role you were handed at birth. Take the son of a poor Italian weaver, a man with no title, no name, no claim to anything. He decided he was destined for greatness, invented a noble lineage, and began carrying himself like visiting royalty, demanding titles, honors, a share of whatever he might discover. The kings and queens of Europe, dazzled by his certainty, gave him ships. His name was Christopher Columbus. Law 34. Be royal in your own fashion. Act like a king, and you will be treated like one. The world takes you, Greene argues, at the value you place on yourself. Set that price high and carry it without a flicker of doubt. But the surface can do more than attract. It can conceal, and here the laws turn darker. Greene's third law, the one at the black heart of the whole book, is this: conceal your intentions. Keep people off balance and in the dark, and by the time they see where you were going, it's too late. No one practiced this like the con artist Greene loved to study. There was a swindler known as the Yellow Kid who could empty a greedy man's bank account and leave him grateful for it. He would befriend his target, feed him a tip about a fortune to be made, build an entire fake office with fake clerks and fake telegrams, an entire theater constructed around a single lie. The mark never saw the trap because he was too busy admiring the bait. Concealment doesn't always wear a con man's smile, though. Sometimes it looks like humility. In 1927, a warlord named Balcha rode into the Ethiopian capital with a small army, swaggering, contemptuous of the country's soft-spoken young ruler. That ruler welcomed him with banquets and flattery, bowing, deferring, playing the harmless host. Balcha feasted for days, but while he ate, the young ruler was quietly buying off Balcha's soldiers, one by one. When the warlord finally rode home, he found his army gone, vanished into the service of the man he had despised. That gentle host was Haile Selassie, the future emperor. His weapon was not a sword. It was the appearance of weakness. And that is a pattern Greene returns to again and again. The softest surface can hide the hardest intention. So far, we've shaped how others see us. Now the laws turn to how we use them. And Greene's advice here overturns everything your mother told you. Do not trust your friends, he warns. Learn to use your enemies. Friends grow envious and entitled. A former enemy given a chance has everything to prove. When a Chinese general named Cao Kuang-yin seized the throne and founded the Sung dynasty, his greatest danger wasn't his rivals. It was his own loyal commanders, any of whom could do to him exactly what he had just done to the last emperor. So he threw them a banquet. And over wine, he gently offered them a trade. Give up your armies and take in return riches, estates, and peace for the rest of your days. They took it. He broke the endless cycle of coups without a single execution by turning his most dangerous friends into comfortable, grateful strangers. This is the engine underneath so many of the laws. Read what people truly want, then hand it to them. Greene is blunt about it. When you need something, never appeal to a person's mercy or gratitude. Appeal to their self-interest. Show them what they stand to gain, and they'll move mountains for you. And here we reach the anchor of the whole book, the thing Greene wants you to feel in your spine. You are already playing the game of power. Every favor, every alliance, every warm handshake carries a current of interest running underneath it. The naive person thinks the surface is the whole story. The player reads the current. Which brings us to the law people find hardest to hear. The search for the one thing that lets you move anyone at all. Greene calls it discovering each man's thumbscrew. Everyone, he writes, has a weakness, a gap in the castle wall. It might be greed or fear or a hunger to be loved. But most often, it is the oldest weakness of all, vanity. He tells an old fable of a lion who could not catch a nimble mountain goat leaping across the cliffs. So a fox went to the goat and flattered him. Surely a creature so magnificent, so fearless, could make one more daring leap? Swollen with pride, the goat jumped where he never should have, and the lion was waiting below. The thumbscrew wasn't the goat's legs. It was his ego. Find the insecurity a person is desperate to hide, Greene says, and you've found the lever that moves them. These are cold laws, ruthless ones, and Greene does not flinch from the coldest of them all. Law 15. Crush your enemy totally. Leave an enemy half defeated, he warns, and you leave an ember that will one day burn your house down. In 208 BC, two men fought for control of China. One, Xiang Yu, was a mighty warrior who won battle after battle against his weaker, wilier rival, Liu Pang. Again and again, Xiang Yu had him cornered. Again and again, out of pride, out of mercy, out of a sense that the war was already won, he let him slip away. Each time, the spared rival grew stronger, until the day Liu Pang's armies closed around Xiang Yu for the last time. The warrior who had won everything lost it, because he had never finished what he started. And Liu Pang, the rival he kept sparing, crowned himself emperor and went down in history as one of the greatest rulers China ever knew. But raw ruthlessness has a cost, and Greene knows it. So even as the laws demand you play hard, they also demand you disappear into the crowd. Law 38. Think as you like, but behave like others. Around the year 478 BC, a Spartan general named Pausanias led Greece to a great victory over Persia, and then he ruined himself, not in battle, but at dinner. He fell in love with Persian luxury, dressed in Persian robes, adopted foreign manners, and paraded his difference in front of the very Greeks who had followed him. They didn't admire him, they resented him. His strangeness read as contempt, and the resentment grew until it swallowed him whole. Show the world your difference too openly, Greene warns, and you don't inspire people, you make them feel judged. The wise keep their strangeness inside and wear the common face outside. And when you finally do win completely. Greene has one last warning, and it is the one his own historical figures forget the most. Law 47. Do not go past the mark you aimed for. The moment of victory, he writes, is often the moment of greatest peril. Success intoxicates. It floods you with confidence, tempts you to push one step further, to grab the extra prize, to humiliate the beaten foe. And that one greedy step is where empires overreach and fortunes reverse. The player who wins and stops, who pockets the victory and walks away calm, keeps it. Look back at every ruin we've walked through, and you'll see it. It was rarely the enemy who destroyed these masters of power. It was the moment, right after they had won. Which forces an uncomfortable question. If these laws are so powerful, why did so many of the people who mastered them die in prison cells, on battlefields, in exile? Greene doesn't hide it. Power is a game with no final victory. The courtier who climbs highest has the farthest to fall. Every law can be turned against the person who wields it. And Greene builds this doubt into the book itself. After each law, he adds a reversal, a moment when following it will destroy you. Court too much attention, and you become a target. Crush an enemy who had no fight left, and you look like a monster. There is no formula that always works, which is exactly why the final law is the strangest of all, and why it quietly cancels every rule that came before it. Law 48. Assume formlessness. For most of history, Greene points out the strong were the rigid, the fortress, the phalanx, the fixed and armored thing. Consider Sparta, a whole society hammered into a single, unbreakable shape. Every citizen a soldier, every day identical, a culture perfected for war. And that perfection was its doom. Because a thing with one fixed form can only meet the one situation it was built for. When the world changed, Sparta could not. Its rigidity, once its strength, became a cage it could not escape, and the great warrior state faded into a museum piece. The lesson lands like cold water. The most dangerous shape to hold in a changing world is a permanent one. Now set Sparta beside its opposite. In 1945 and 46, a smaller, weaker army faced a stronger enemy across the plains of Manchuria. Instead of standing and fighting, it moved like mercury, scattering into 100 pieces, abandoning cities without a fight, refusing to ever become a single target the enemy could strike. It had no fixed front, no fortress, no shape to attack, and the larger, rigid force wore itself out swinging at empty air until it collapsed. That fluid army belonged to Mao Zedong. This is why formlessness is the master law. Be as fluid and formless as water, Greene writes. Never bet on stability or lasting order, because everything changes. The other 47 laws are tools. This one tells you never to become a prisoner of any tool, including these. And that is the twist hiding inside this notorious book. On the surface, the 48 Laws of Power reads like a manual for the ruthless, a handbook for conmen and tyrants. It has been banned in prisons and condemned from pulpits. But read to the end, and something quieter emerges. Greene isn't only teaching you to play, he's teaching you to see. To recognize the game already being played around you, the flattery with a hook in it, the friend who is quietly a spy, the humble smile hiding an intention. Because the person most easily destroyed by these laws is the one who refuses to believe the game exists. You don't have to be Fouquet, dazzling the king into your own destruction. You just have to understand why the party was a mistake. So here's what Robert Greene leaves you with. Power is not a thing you have. It is a game you play every day, in every room, whether you chose to enter it or not. The only real question is whether you're playing it awake or asleep. Learn the laws not so you can become a manipulator, but so you can never again be someone's easy mark. See the current beneath the surface. Guard your reputation. Say less. Hold your shape lightly. And remember the finance minister who threw the most beautiful party in the world to honor his king and never understood until the musketeer knocked on his door that he had been playing all along. You're already playing the game of power. Greene just handed you the rules. If this pulled you in, stay with us. Next, we open the mind of the man who started it all, Machiavelli. Until then, read deeply and see clearly.